Installing those cameras was oddly therapeutic. Each screw I drilled into the stucco exterior of our house felt like reclaiming control. The desert sun hung low, turning the sky into streaks of orange and purple, while I mounted the final 4000 lens above our garage. If Brenda wanted theater, I was about to give her surround sound and ultra-high definition by Tuesday afternoon. Our property looked like Fort Knox, disguised as suburban normalcy. 2 cameras covered the driveway. One faced the front door. Another captured the sidewalk and mailbox cluster where Brenda liked to linger, pretending to inspect landscaping symmetry. Inside, I installed a small but powerful recording device near the entryway, perfectly legal. Perfectly positioned, Sarah reviewed every placement with calm precision. "Angles matter," she said quietly, adjusting one feed on my phone. "Clear line of sight, no blind spots, and make sure the timestamp feature is permanently embedded." "You've done this before?" I joked. Her expression didn't change. "I've seen what happens when evidence isn't airtight." That night, I couldn't sleep. The air conditioner hummed softly, but my brain replayed every scenario. Brenda was escalating fast. Fake citations, fraudulent threats. Now federal eviction fantasies. The woman wasn't bluffing, she believed her own authority. Wednesday morning, at exactly 6:02 a.m., the trap snapped shut. The notification buzzed on my phone before my alarm even went off. Motion detected. Front door. I opened the live feed. There. She was Brenda Kessler, HOA president, wearing an aggressively beige pantsuit, like she was auditioning for a low-budget political thriller. She glanced left, then right. In her hand official-looking paperwork, she bent down and slid the envelope under our door. The camera zoomed automatically, capturing everything in perfect clarity. Her face, the documents, even the smug little smile she wore as she straightened up. My pulse slowed instead of spiking. Because this was exactly what we needed. I waited a full 5 minutes before opening the door, pretending grogginess for effect. The envelope was thick, heavy cardstock, bold black lettering across the front. Notice of federal eviction proceedings, see actually. Laughed. Inside were at least 8 pages of fabricated legal nonsense. Case number format completely wrong. Federal court seal distorted like it had been copied off Google Images. And the signature at the bottom. Judge S. Rivera, my wife's forged signature. The audacity was breathtaking. Sarah stood beside me, reading silently. Her face was unreadable, but I saw her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. She used the district seal incorrectly, Sarah murmured. And that's not even my current signature format. I looked at her. She forged your name. Sarah inhaled slowly. She impersonated a federal judge and issued fraudulent court documents. That's multiple felonies. The room felt electrically charged, but we didn't call anyone. Not yet, because timing was everything. By noon, 3 other families had received identical envelopes. The Lucys, the Patels, Gonzaleses, all stamped with fake federal authority, all signed with my wife's forged name, Brenda. Hadn't just crossed a line, she had detonated it at 3 p.m. I got a call from Mr. Patel. "Henry," he said, voice shaking, "I've verified the case number format. It doesn't exist. This is fabricated." "Don't panic," I told him calmly. "We're handling it." Meanwhile, Sarah made a call of her own, not as my wife, as Judge Rivera. She contacted the clerk's office discreetly to confirm something critical. No filings had been submitted under those case numbers, which meant Brenda hadn't officially entered anything into the system yet. She was bluffing with paper intimidation. That was about to become her worst mistake. Thursday evening, Brenda made her next move. She knocked on our door. Bold, reckless, furious. I checked the camera feed before opening. Audio recording active. When I opened the door, She stood there with the confidence of someone who thought she had already won. "Mr. Rivera," she said sweetly, "I assume you received the federal notice." I kept my expression neutral. I trust you understand the seriousness. Federal court is not something you want to challenge." Her perfume hit me like chemical warfare. "Is that so?" I asked calmly. She tilted her head. "Judge Rivera is known for protecting community property standards. I've done my research." The irony nearly broke me. "You're certain about that?" I asked. "Absolutely," she smiled. "Once eviction proceedings begin, it's irreversible. I suggest you encourage the other families to comply quietly." The arrogance was staggering. "And if we don't?" I asked. Her eyes hardened. "Then I'll see you in federal court." Perfect. Because what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that federal court was about to see her first. After she left, Sarah immediately downloaded the camera footage onto 3 separate encrypted drives. "Intent?" she said softly. She confirmed knowledge. She confirmed threat. She confirmed reliance on forged documents. "Is that good?" I asked. "It's devastating," she replied. Friday morning, something unexpected happened. 2 white families long time. Brenda supporters knocked on our door. "We got notices too," Mrs. Henderson whispered. Not eviction, but warnings about property compliance inspections. Brenda was expanding. That was her fatal flaw. Discrimination cases are powerful, but fraud combined with impersonation. That's nuclear by Saturday, our backyard strategy. Meetings transformed into structured evidence briefings. Mr. Patel graded financial spreadsheets tracking illegal fine collections. Mrs. Lucy compiled written testimonies. Janet Peterson provided text message screenshots showing Brenda discussing targeted removal strategy. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were plaintiffs in waiting. Sunday night, Sarah looked at me across the kitchen table. "She'd try to file something officially Monday," she said. "When she does, the clerk's office will immediately flag the forged seal." And then, Sarah's eyes were steady. "Then federal investigators get involved." I exhaled slowly. The desert outside was quiet, still, peaceful. Inside our house, the storm was fully formed. Brenda Kessler believed she was about to evict minority families using a forged federal judge's authority. What she was actually about to do was walk herself into a federal criminal investigation, and Monday morning was coming fast. Monday morning arrived with the kind of stillness that only exists before something explodes. At 8:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Unknown number," I answered. "Mr. Rivera," a calm female voice asked. "This is Clerk Daniels from the U.S. District Court. I'm calling regarding several eviction filings submitted this morning referencing your address." I locked eyes with Sarah across the kitchen. "Here we go." "Yes," I said evenly. "There appeared to be irregularities with the submitted documentation," the clerk continued. "Specifically, the federal seal and a judicial signature. We need clarification." Sarah stood slowly and stepped into her office, closing the door behind her. "Game time?" I kept my voice steady. "Oh, what kind of irregularities?" "The seal format is outdated, and Judge Rivera's signature does not match any authorized record." I nearly smiled. "I see," I replied carefully. "That sounds serious." "It is," she said plainly. "We are escalating this to internal review." We thanked her and ended the call. 30 seconds later, Sarah's phone rang inside her office. I couldn't hear the full conversation, but her tone shifted instantly cool, controlled, unmistakably judicial. "Yes, I'm aware," she said. "Preserve everything." She emerged 5 minutes later. "It's official," she said. "Brenda filed forged federal eviction petitions against 4 families this morning, electronically submitted." "She actually did it?" I asked. She did. There was no triumph in Sarah's voice now. Just inevitability. Forgery of a federal judge's signature, she continued. Impersonation, fraudulent court filings, and civil rights violations layered underneath. How bad is it? I asked. Sarah met my eyes. Federal agents, bad. At 10:47 a.m., two unmarked vehicles parked discreetly near the HOA clubhouse. Word travels fast in suburban neighborhoods. Curtains twitched. Garage doors paused mid-close. Brenda's Lexus was already parked in her usual spot near the entrance. I watched everything through our camera feed app like it was live television. 2 individuals exited the vehicles. Suits.com posture. No rush. That kind of quiet authority you only see in serious situations. They entered the clubhouse. 20 minutes later, Brenda walked out. But she wasn't strutting. She wasn't composed. She looked confused. One of the agents spoke calmly, while showing her something on a tablet. Brenda's posture stiffened. She shook her head rapidly, started talking faster, gesturing, even without audio. I could read the body language denial. The agent handed her what looked like official paperwork. Her hands trembled slightly as she took it. And just like that, the hunter had become the subject. By noon, our phones exploded with messages. Mrs. Lucy, federal investigators came to my house asking about eviction notices. Mr. Patel, they requested copies of all citations and financial statements. Janet, they asked me about the text messages. This wasn't HOA drama anymore. This was federal procedure. Sarah remained composed all afternoon, though I could tell her mind was moving at courtroom speed. She thought filing electronically made it legitimate. Sarah explained. But federal? Systems log, metadata, IP address, timestamp, device identification, meaning they can prove she personally submitted the forged documents. The precision of it all felt almost surgical. By 3:30 p.m., the neighborhood Facebook group detonated posts started appearing. Anyone else visited by federal agents? HOA emergency meeting canceled. What is happening? Then Brenda posted. Her message was frantic, but trying to sound composed. There has been a misunderstanding regarding certain compliance filings. I am cooperating fully and expect this to be resolved quickly. Please refrain from spreading rumors, misunderstanding. Forgery of a federal judge's signature was now a misunderstanding. Bold strategy at 5:15 p.m. The knock came. Not on our door, on Brenda's. I watched through the exterior street camera. This time, there were 3 agents. They were inside her house for nearly an hour. When they emerged, Brenda was no longer defensive. She looked pale, deflated. Her husband's old political campaign sign still leaned crookedly against the garage. While ironic now as the agents left. One of them carried a slim evidence box. That's when the shift happened across the neighborhood. Support evaporated by evening. Residents who had defended her for months were suddenly very quiet. Power only works when people believe in it. And belief had just collapsed. Inside our kitchen, Sarah poured herself a glass of water and sat down slowly. It started, I said. She nodded. They'll subpoena her financial records next, she explained. If Patel's embezzlement findings? Hold up, that adds wire fraud. How much time is that? Sarah didn't hesitate. Potentially decades if stacked. The weight of that landed heavily. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. Tuesday morning brought the next development. A certified, letter this time realtor arrived at Brenda's house. Federal grand jury subpoena. I know because Janet called. Us whispering like she'd witnessed a crime scene. She screamed, Janet said. I've never heard someone scream like that. I didn't feel joy. I felt something steadier. justice unfolding exactly as it's designed to. By Wednesday, Brenda resigned from her HOA presidency via a brief email citing health reasons. No apology, no admission, just disappearance. But resignation doesn't stop a federal investigation. It just removes the illusion of control. Asterisk, Thursday afternoon. Sarah received formal notification that she was officially recused from any case connected to the HOA filings, which meant the matter would proceed before the second housing judge in the district, unbiased, detached, and now fully aware of the forged signature. Attempt Brenda's gamble that Judge Rivera supports. Property standards had backfired. Catastrophically, she hadn't realized she was targeting the household of the very judge whose name she forged. Statistical probability had become poetic justice. That evening, as the desert cooled and sprinklers ticked across lawns, something felt different. Lighter, the Lucy kids played hockey in the street again. Mrs. Patel hung Diwali lights early just because she could. No citations appeared. No clipboard patrol. No beige Lexus circling like a predator. Power built on fear collapses. The moment fear disappears and Brenda's power was gone. But the legal process, that was only beginning because federal investigations move quietly at first. Then suddenly, and when they do, there's no HOA meeting to control the narrative. Only courtrooms and consequences. The waiting was the hardest part. Federal investigations don't move like HOA meetings. There are no dramatic announcements, no gossip-filled newsletters, no dramatic speeches in poorly decorated clubhouses. They move in silence, methodical, precise, like a machine assembling itself behind a wall. For 2 weeks, Sunset Ridge existed in a strange limbo. Brenda stayed inside her house. Her white Lexus barely moved. The once daily patrol walk stopped completely. No more measuring grass blades, no more photographing driveways, no more community standard emails at 2 o'clock. It was like the neighborhood had collectively exhaled. But inside that quiet, something larger was forming. One Thursday morning at 9:17 a.m., Sarah received a secure call. She stepped into her office again, closing the door gently. I didn't need to hear the words to know what it meant. When she came back out, she didn't sit down immediately. It's moving forward, she said calmly. How far forward? I asked. A federal grand jury returned an indictment this morning. The word felt heavy. Indictment. That wasn't investigation anymore. That was prosecution. The charges, as Sarah explained carefully, without breaching ethics, were severe forgery of a federal judicial signature, fraudulent use of a federal seal, wire fraud for electronic filing of falsified documents, civil rights violations under the Fair Housing Act, financial misconduct pending further review. She signed my name, Sarah said quietly. In a federal filing, the simplicity of that statement carried more weight than any dramatic reaction could. Brenda hadn't just harassed neighbors. She had attacked the integrity of a federal court, and federal courts protect themselves aggressively. The arrest happened the following Monday, not dramatic, not chaotic, just precise. 2 agents arrived mid-morning. Neighbors watched discreetly from behind curtains and half-open garage doors. Brenda walked out wearing sunglasses, her posture stiff with forced dignity. But dignity can't mask handcuffs. They weren't rough. They weren't loud. They were calm. That calmness is what makes it real. As she was guided into the vehicle, she scanned the street for supporters, for sympathy, for outrage. There was none. Only silence, the kind of silence that follows exposure. By afternoon, local news picked it up. Phoenix HOA president indicted in federal fraud and civil rights case. The article mentioned forged judicial documents, impersonation targeted, discrimination against minority families. It did not mention our family connection. Judicial ethics shielded that detail. But in our kitchen, we understood the full circle of it. Brenda had tried to weaponize federal authority. Instead, she activated it. That evening, our backyard filled again. But this time, there were no anxious whispers. There was relief. Mr. Patel brought printed copies of the indictment summary. Mrs. Lucy brought homemade dumplings. Maria Gonzalez laughed freely for the first time in months. The air felt different, not victorious, not celebratory, just balanced, as if gravity had been restored. But justice isn't instant. Indictment leads to court, and court leads to exposure. Brenda was released on bond pending trial. Conditions included no contact with alleged victims, no involvement in HOA governance, no financial transactions involving association accounts, surrender of passport. The HOA board appointed an interim president immediately. Within 48 hours, all outstanding fines issued under Brenda's term were suspended. Within a week, the association voted to commission an independent audit. That audit would uncover more than anyone expected. 3 weeks later, the financial review concluded. Mr. Patel's instincts were correct. Approximately $12,400 in HOA funds had been diverted into an unauthorized account. Brenda controlled, labeled vaguely as legal preparedness. Expenses. There had been no lawyer, no legitimate filings, just quiet siphoning. When the updated financial findings were added to the federal case, the charges expanded. Embezzlement, additional wire fraud counts. The situation shifted from overzealous HOA president to patterned financial misconduct. And patterns matter in federal court. One night, Sarah and I sat on the patio listening to distant sprinklers. I asked the question that had been sitting quietly in my chest. "Do you ever feel bad?" I asked. She looked at me steadily. For what? For how big this became. Sarah didn't answer immediately. Then she said something I'll never forget. She chose escalation at every decision point. Authority is responsibility. When someone abuses it intentionally, consequences aren't cruelty, they're correction. The desert wind moves softly through the yard. Peaceful, measured, fair. The trial date was set for early spring. Until then, federal prosecutors prepared meticulously. They had digital submission logs tying Brenda's IP address to the forged filings, financial records tracing diverted funds, recorded threats from HOA meetings, testimonies from affected families, the 4K footage of her delivering fraudulent eviction notices, evidence layered upon evidence, no emotion required, just facts. Meanwhile, something beautiful happened inside Sunset Ridge. Community returned. Families once targeted began hosting open gatherings. To Lucy's invited neighbors for Lunar New Year. The Patels planned Diwali openly. The Gonzaleses decorated boldly for birthdays. Even longtime residents who had once remained neutral began apologizing quietly. I didn't realize how bad it was. One neighbor admitted, "Fear distorts perception. Transparency corrects it." 3 months after the arrest, jury selection began. Sarah, of course, remained entirely uninvolved. She carried herself professionally, as always. But at home, there was a subtle stillness in her. Not tension, not anxiety, just awareness. Because while the case wasn't assigned to her courtroom, it still bore her name, and forged names leave scars. Opening arguments began on a Monday morning. Federal prosecutors laid out the timeline cleanly. From discriminatory citations, fabricated finesto, forged federal filingsto, embezzlement. It wasn't dramatic, it was devastatingly structured. Defense attempted to frame Brenda as overwhelmed, misguided, misinformed. But forged signatures are hard to explain. Away, so are digital footprints. So are bank transfers. So are recorded threats. Patterns don't panic under examination. People do by the end of week 1. The jury had seen everything. The fake eviction notice, the forged signature, the incorrect seal placement, the electronic filing, METAT, ATA, and finally, the security footage of Brenda sliding those documents under our door at 6:02 a.m., the courtroom. Reportedly went silent during that clip because intent was visible, calculated, deliberate, back in Sunset Ridge. We waited, not nervously, not angrily, just patiently. Justice doesn't rush, it concludes, and soon. It would. The verdict came faster than anyone expected. 4 days of testimony. 2 days of deliberation. That was all it took. By Friday afternoon, the jury had reached a decision. I wasn't in the courtroom. Neither was Sarah. Judicial ethics and optics kept us far away from the spectacle. But word travels fast when something explosive is about to happen. At 2:37 p.m., Mr. Patel texted our group chat. They're back. The desert sun outside felt too bright, too ordinary. Like the world didn't understand what was about to shift. 30-8 minutes later, another message. Guilty. One word, then another. All counts. I exhaled slowly, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. Forgery of a federal judge's signature. Guilty, fraudulent use of a federal seal. Guilty, wire fraud. Guilty. Civil rights violations. Guilty, embezzlement. Guilty. The machine had finished assembling, and it worked. The courtroom, according to Janet, who attended, went completely still when the final count was read. Brenda apparently didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't collapse. She just blinked, like someone waking up too late. Because here's the thing about people who abuse small power. They never imagine large power responding. HOA. Authority feels big inside a clubhouse. Federal authority feels infinite inside a courtroom. Sentencing was scheduled 6 weeks later. Those 6 weeks felt different from the investigation phase. Quieter, reflective, sunset. Ridge wasn't tense anymore. It was rebuilding. The interim HOA. Board dissolved half the enhanced community standards Brenda had invented. Transparent financial oversight measures were implemented. Elections were recertified properly. Open forums replaced closed-door decisions. And something unexpected happened. People started talking to each other again. Not about violations, about life. Kids' soccer games, solar panel installations, recipes, retirement plans. Fear had fractured. The neighborhood accountability stitched it back together. One evening, as Sarah and I walked past the clubhouse, the same place where Brenda once staged her authoritarian performances, I asked her something that had been sitting in my mind. Did she ever have a chance to stop this? Sarah thought for a moment. Yes, she said simply. At every step, she explained it like a judge, not a spouse. When confronted with minor correction, she escalated. When challenged with facts, she doubled down. When exposed administratively, she turned criminal. Consequences scale with choices. That line stayed with me. Consequences scale with choices. Sentencing day arrived under a sky so clear it looked artificial. Federal courtrooms don't allow theatrics. They are structured, deliberate, almost sterile in their seriousness. Brenda stood before the bench no longer as HOA. President, not as community enforcer, not as neighborhood authority, just as defendant. Kessler, the prosecutor, laid out impact statements. From families, Mrs. Lucy described the anxiety of receiving fake eviction papers. Mr. Patel explained months of financial uncertainty. Maria Gonzalez spoke about her daughter asking if they would lose their house because they weren't American. Enough. That line reportedly changed the air in the room. Because discrimination isn't abstract when it touches children. The judge, not Sarah, delivered the sentence calmly. 40-8 months in federal prison. Restitution for embezzled funds, permanent. Prohibition from holding fiduciary positions in any community association. Supervised release, following incarceration. For years, for a woman who once measured grass, blades to assert dominance. For years, because she forged the name of a federal judge, because she weaponized race, because she believed fear would silence resistance. Instead, documentation spoke, and documentation wins. When the news reached Sunset Ridge, there was no cheering, no celebration, just collective acknowledgement. It was done that evening. Something beautiful happened. The Lucy family hosted a neighborhood dinner, not as protest, not as statement, just as invitation. Long tables stretched across driveways. Lanterns hung from trees. Children ran freely without someone measuring noise levels. The Patels brought sweets. The Gonzaleses brought music. Even neighbors who once stayed neutral showed up carrying folding chairs and humility. I stood there watching it all unfold, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Normal, not tense, not strategic, just normal. Later that night, as sprinklers ticked rhythmically across lawns and conversations faded into warm desert air, Sarah squeezed my hand. "You handled it correctly," she said. "We handled it," I replied. She shook her head slightly. "You resisted escalation. That matters. Because here's the truth. At any moment, I could have exploded. I could have screamed back at Brenda, threatened, provoked, played into her narrative, but calm documentation dismantled her faster than anger ever could. That's the part people underestimate. Power doesn't collapse because you shout at it. It collapses because you expose it. Weeks later, the HOA officially elected a new president, Mrs. Henderson, a retired school principal who began her first meeting with a sentence that felt almost symbolic. "This community will operate on transparency and fairness, not interpretation." No applause, just agreement. Because after everything, nobody wanted drama. They wanted stability. Sometimes I replay that original moment in my head. 6:02 a.m., the fake eviction notice sliding under our door. The forged signature, Brenda. Thought she was stepping into control. She was stepping into a trap, built by her own ego. She underestimated documentation. She underestimated federal systems. And most of all, she underestimated the family she targeted. If there's one lesson this entire saga carved into me, it's this: authority without accountability is temporary, but truth, when properly recorded, is permanent. Sunset Ridge isn't paradise. It's just a neighborhood again. Kids play street hockey. Grass grows slightly taller than 2.5 inches. Cooking smells drift freely into the evening air, and nobody measures them. Anymore, you'd think the story ended with the sentence, 48 months, restitution, ordered. Community. Restored, clean, final. Cinematic, but real life doesn't cut to black after the verdict. It lingers. And sometimes, it echoes 2 weeks after sentencing. I was in the driveway installing panels on Mrs. Henderson's carport when I noticed something strange. Brenda's house was being emptied, not dramatically, not chaotically, quietly. A moving truck idled at the curb. 2 workers carried out carefully labeled boxes. No shouting. No spectacle, just departure. Her white Lexus was gone. The blinds were up for the first. In months, it looked less like a fortress now, and more like a house. I stood there longer than I meant to, because here's something nobody talks about. When someone falls that hard, the impact doesn't just hit them, it hits everything around them. That evening, Janet came over. She looked uncomfortable. I visited her before sentencing. She said softly. I raised an eyebrow. She asked to see me, Janet clarified quickly. She doesn't really have anyone else left. And? I asked carefully. Janet hesitated. She didn't think it would go this far. Course she didn't. People who misuse power rarely believe consequences apply to them. She kept saying. She was protecting property values, Janet continued. That everything she did was for the good of the neighborhood. I leaned back in my chair. Intent doesn't erase harm, I said quietly. Janet nodded. I know. I don't. Think she ever saw herself as the villain? That stuck with me, because villains rarely do. Later that night, I asked Sarah something that had been quietly forming in my mind. Do you think she understands it now? Sarah didn't answer immediately. She understands she was caught, she said finally. Whether she understands why it was wrong, that takes introspection. Prison doesn't automatically create that. The desert wind moves softly through the trees. Consequences correct behavior. But they don't always transform character. A few days later, something unexpected arrived in our mailbox. No federal seal, no aggressive letterhead, just a plain envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from Brenda, short, controlled, almost clinical. I never intended for this to become criminal. I believed I was maintaining standards. I see now that I overstepped. I regret the stress caused. No direct apology, no acknowledgement of discrimination, just overstepped. I read it twice, then handed it to Sarah. She scanned it calmly. What do you think? I asked. I think. She said carefully, it's written by someone who regrets the outcome more than the actions. That sentence carried weight. Regret for being punished is not the same as remorse for causing harm. Meanwhile, Sunset Ridge continued healing. The HOA audit became public record. New bylaws were added, explicitly prohibiting selective enforcement. Mandatory. Diversity and fair housing education sessions were implemented for board members. Transparency. Portals allowed residents to view all expenditures. Sunlight, it turns out, is the best disinfectant. But the emotional ripple didn't fully settle until one quiet Saturday afternoon. I was trimming hedges when Mrs. Lucy's grandson ran up to me. Mr. Rivera. He shouted excitedly. Grandma says we're staying forever. I smiled. That's good news. He nodded seriously. She said nobody can kick us out for cooking. It hit me harder than the verdict ever did, because adults argue about policy. Children just want safety. And for months, that safety had been threatened. Not legally, emotionally, that night. Our neighborhood organized something unofficial. No HOA sponsorship. No structured agenda. Just a block party. Music played openly. Different languages. Blended into laughter. Food from 5 cultures filled folding tables. And nobody, not one person, mentioned property values. We talked about schools, travel, retirement, recipes, real things, normal things. Brenda's house sat empty at the edge of the cul-de-sac. Lights off, silent, not haunting, just finished around 9 p.m. as string lights flickered. Softly overhead, Mr. Patel approached me with 2 cups of tea. You realize, he said thoughtfully, this could have gone very differently. How so? If you'd reacted angrily at the beginning. If we'd fought emotionally instead of strategically. He wasn't wrong. Anger would have fed Brenda's narrative. Documentation dismantled it. Power thrives on chaos. It collapses. Under structure later that evening. Sarah stood beside me watching the kids play hockey again, right in the middle of the street. Unrestricted UNMEASURED, UNBOTHERED, double quotes, justice isn't loud, she said quietly. No, I agreed. It's precise. She squeezed my hand gently, and in that moment, something unexpected surfaced in me. Not pride, not victory, gratitude, because This story could have turned dark in so many ways, but it didn't. It turned deliberate, measured, documented, and accountable months later. We learned through public records that Brenda had begun serving her sentence at a federal facility in California. No dramatic updates, no redemption. Just process, and process matters, because justice isn't about spectacle, it's about correction. Sometimes, I still think about that first fake eviction notice, the smell of fresh toner, the forged signature, the audacity if she had stopped at the first citation, if she had backed down during the meeting, if she had admitted fault before filing federal documents. This story would be smaller, but she escalated, and escalation magnifies consequences. There's one final detail most people don't know. The federal clerk who first flagged the forged signature sent Sarah a brief professional message after the case concluded. It read, "Integrity of the court remains intact." For words, simple, powerful, because that was the real target, not just our house, not just our neighborhood, the integrity of the system itself, and that system held. Sunset Ridge isn't perfect, it never was. But now it's balanced, no clipboards prowling. At dawn, no fabricated standards, no fear disguised as authority, just neighbors, living, talking, laughing, cooking, laughing, existing, without someone measuring them. 6 months later, Sunset Ridge looked ordinary, and that was the miracle. No tension humming in the air, no whisper networks, no sudden policy emails at midnight. Just sprinklers ticking at sunset, kids racing bikes down the coal-dev-sack, and the faint smell of someone grilling too much garlic. Normal is underrated. You only realize its value after it's threatened. Brenda's house eventually sold, not dramatically, not as a foreclosure spectacle. Just a quiet listing, a quiet transaction, a quiet transfer of keys. A young couple moved in. First-time homeowners, they brought plans, not rulebooks. The first thing they did was knock on doors and introduce themselves. No clipboard, no measuring tape, just cookies. That detail felt symbolic because power can enter a neighborhood in 2 ways: through control or through connection. And we had already seen what control looked like. One evening, Mrs. Henderson called a voluntary HOA meeting. Not mandatory, not urgent. Just community discussion. Attendance was higher than any meeting in years. But the tone was different. Open, transparent. She stood at the front of the clubhouse, the same spot where Brenda once delivered warnings, like verdicts, and said something simple. We are not here to enforce perfection. We are here to maintain fairness. Nobody clapped dramatically, but heads nodded because fairness feels different than dominance. After the meeting, Mr. Patel pulled me aside. "You ever think about how close this came to dividing us permanently?" he asked. "I had fear isolates. Silence protects abusers, and comfort makes bystanders passive. If even one family had moved away quietly, if even one complaint had gone undocumented, if that forged signature had slipped through unnoticed, this story might have ended very differently. Systems don't fail all at once. They fail when good people decide it's not worth the trouble." Later that night, sat outside alone for a while. The desert sky stretched wide and still, and I thought about something most viewers of a story like this might miss. This wasn't really about an HOA. It wasn't even about Brenda. It was about escalation. Every major consequence in this story came from one repeated decision. Push further. She could have stopped at strict enforcement. She could have stopped at unfair fines. She could have stopped at discrimination. Instead, she escalated into forgery, into fraud, into federal crime. And here's the truth that hits hardest: small, unchecked power always tests its limits. The only reason it stops is resistance backed by structure. A week later, something unexpected happened. Maria Gonzalez knocked on our door. Her daughter stood beside her holding a small framed drawing. It was a picture of our house, and next to it, written in bright marker, "Thank you for not letting us lose our home." I swallowed hard, because in adult conversations we talk about policy, legal systems, federal charges. But in a child's mind, it was simple. Home was almost taken, and someone stopped it. That's legacy, not court records, not news headlines. Impact. I asked Sarah once, months after everything ended, "Do cases like this stay with you?" She answered honestly, "Not because of the drama, because of the precedent." Precedent. Precedent, I asked. When authority is abused and corrected properly, it reinforces the boundary for everyone watching. That's what most people don't understand. Justice isn't just punishment. It's a warning shot across the bow of future misconduct. It says, there is a line, and if you cross it deliberately, the system will respond. Sunset Ridge has new traditions. Now, Quarterly POTLUCKS. Open financial reports posted publicly. Rotating board positions to prevent consolidation of power. And an unofficial rule nobody wrote down, but everyone follows. Transparency first, because secrecy was the soil where abuse grew. Sometimes, new neighbors hear fragments of the story. They ask casually, "Wasn't there some kind of scandal here a while back?" We usually smile and say, "It's handled." Because that's the beauty of it. It's not ongoing, it's not festering, it's concluded, handled. Properly. One last thing. About a year after the verdict, we received a brief notice through official channels Brenda had filed an appeal. It was denied, the ruling was short, evidence sufficient, procedure proper. Conviction affirmed. Final, there would be no rewrite of history, no technical escape. Documentation had sealed it. From the beginning, if there's one message I hope anyone watching this story takes away, it's this. Never underestimate calm resistance. Anger feels powerful in the moment, but structure wins in the long run. Document, stay measured, escalate through proper channels, let evidence speak, because the loudest person in the room rarely controls the outcome. The most prepared one does. Tonight, as I sit on the same patio where this story began, the neighborhood is quiet, peaceful, balanced, not because conflict never existed, but because it was addressed correctly. Brenda tried to weaponize authority. Instead, she demonstrated something bigger. Power without accountability is temporary. Integrity, when documented, is permanent. And in the end, grass grows. Kids laugh, food cooks, and no one measures it anymore.